Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader, and this show is brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia, and it's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. This week's game is 2004's RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, the last entry in the famous theme park simulator franchise that gave players the ability to actually ride their rides. So, no theme this week, only theme parks. You get me? So this is a bit of a weird week. You're probably wondering, hey Joe, why is it just you? Where's Peter? He didn't die, did he? No, Peter's alive. See, Peter goes on vacation, I think the week that this comes out. And as a result, we were going to record 2 episodes today, other than our usual 1 episode a week. And then Peter found out that he would be traveling for work this entire week, and so recording 2 episodes became completely unfeasible, and so we're going to do a little bit of an experimental thing. This week, it's just me. I'm just going to talk about RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 by myself, on my own lonesome, and next week Peter will be here with a solo episode of his own, and that should not only sort of cut down on the editing burden for Peter before he goes off on vacation, but also will, serve to make sure you at least get something when it's more likely you were going to get nothing. So I will ask myself the question that Peter usually asks me: how am I doing and what am I playing? Well, I'm doing pretty good, Joe. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it when you dig into how my life is going. As for what I am playing, it's pretty much just been an entire week of Neo: The World Ends With You. It is really good, folks. It's just really, really good. I love the soundtrack. I love the characters. I love the story so far. It's just been a great time, and I can't wait to talk about it more once I have finished it. Who knows? Maybe next time you hear me, I will have finished it. I would hope so. But other than that, not really any more games. I mean, I played a lot of Power Wash Simulator while watching some stuff, and that's really it outside of The World Ends With You. So let's get into some composer follow-up news, because there is still some of that. They're doing good work, the composers that we have followed in the past. For instance, you can now pre-order the physical edition of Where the Water Tastes Like Wine from Limited Run Games. Last year we brought this game to the table to talk about its honestly fantastic soundtrack by composer Ryan Ike. If you listened to that episode and it sounded right up your alley, but you wanted a physical version for whatever reason, there you go. It's right there. You can head on in and do that. Katamari Damacy Reroll is now available on Game Pass, and if you have Game Pass, you should play Katamari Damacy. You know what else is coming to Game Pass on October 13th? Hades, my personal game of the year. It is also coming to PlayStation and Xbox that day. Before this, when it came to consoles, it was exclusive to the Switch, and now it is hitting everything else that includes PS4, Xbox One, and PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. Austin Wintory, who we have talked about multiple times for his work on both Assassin's Creed Syndicate the first time and Journey a little earlier this year, he is working on the score for the game Aliens Fireteam Elite, and he has also posted a sample of the game's soundtrack on YouTube, so if you want to go hear what it sounds like when Austin Wintory gets his hands on one of the most influential pieces of sci-fi in the world, hey, that exists. And then something that I feel like was probably announced earlier that I didn't notice until recently, What Remains of Edith Finch is coming to iOS on August 16th. And honestly, that's kind of a big surprise to me. because, man, mobile games have come a really long way. Edith Finch is not something I would think that I'd be able to play on an iPhone or an iPad, but hey, apparently I'm wrong and live in the past, which I could have told you. Speaking of living in the past, let's talk about a game where pretty much anybody that saw the title of this episode thought, why? And the answer is nostalgia. I want to talk about a game from my childhood that played a very prominent part in my childhood. Well, a franchise that played a prominent part in it. This game just sort of existed alongside that, and we'll get to it. RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 was originally released on Windows PC on November 2nd, 2004 in North America, and Europe would see a release on November 3rd. A macOS release happened on November 14th, 2005 in North America and November 25th in Europe. And then a full 10 years later, speaking of games on iOS that you wouldn't really expect, though I guess this one's not a huge surprise, it came out on iOS on August 12th, 2015. And most recently, it got a re-release under the name RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 Complete Edition on September 24th, 2020 for PC and, weirdest of all, Nintendo Switch. This game was developed by Frontier Developments and published by a whole bunch of different publishers depending on what version you're looking at. The original Windows release was published by Atari, but the Mac release was published by Aspyr Media. The iOS version was self-published by Frontier, and Complete Edition was published by Frontier's publishing branch, Frontier Foundry. So what is RollerCoaster Tycoon? Well, it is a business management sim series where the player is put in charge of a theme park. You can build various rides, stalls, you can decorate the park with a variety of themed props, but most importantly, you can design your own roller coasters, as the title implies, whether they are of the wooden variety, which are always the worst roller coasters because they're too bumpy, the steel variety, which are always the coolest, standing. You can do, I think there's one you can make in one of the games where it's like a paraglider, which is pretty neat. But RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 in particular added new mechanics and improvements that had not been present throughout the rest of the series. For instance, you can customize fireworks displays choreographed to in-game music, the soundtrack that we will be talking about when we get to that part of the show. There's also an introduction of guest demographics such as children and teens that were not present in the previous two games. That's right, everybody. In the previous two games, they were just guests, amorphous guests, no children. But now, children, teens, whole families could show up. Also, I'm not going to do it, but the game refers to the guests exclusively as peeps. I'm not going to do that because that feels really weird to say, but just know that in your heart. So it also added a day and night cycle that changes what demographic is being appealed to, which also added open and close times, which I never thought about it. But yeah, those weren't in the original game. With this day-night cycle, though, also comes the fact that you can sort of cater your park to different demographics depending on the time of day. For instance, families prefer rides that function during the day because children should not be legally allowed to stay up past 9 p.m. Please do not look at the times I went to sleep as a child if you make this law and retroactively make it binding. But also, teens prefer night rides that are well lit at night because that's when the wild teen hours begin. I assume I haven't been a teenager in 10 years. But the most important addition to the series that RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 makes is the presence of a coaster cam. This is basically a fancy way of saying you can ride your roller coasters as well as a lot of your other rides, but only rides that are like open air. You can't ride the dark rides. You can't go into the haunted house, which is, even as a kid, that was really, really disappointing. I want to see what the inside of a haunted house in one of these games looks like. Show me the haunted house, cowards. But yeah, this was a huge part of the marketing. This was the one that they showed. You can ride your roller coasters. It's really not that exciting. Maybe if this was a VR title, it would be a little bit more exciting, but to be perfectly honest, it's not that great. But hey, it was a step in the right direction. This is also the first game in the RollerCoaster Tycoon series to be presented in full 3D as opposed to the isometric, I think, sprite-based graphics of the previous two titles. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but they certainly look like it. So in those games, since they are basically sprites that are only built to be looked at from a certain angle, you kind of have set amounts that you're able to rotate. You can only zoom in up to a certain point, but RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, being completely in 3D, means that you can zoom in as much as you want, or you can rotate the game in whatever intervals you want. Though apparently, I did not know this, but the original camera style is also available in the settings. I don't know why you'd want that, but it's there, I guess. In RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, there are actually two play modes. There's Career and there's Sandbox, and you can probably guess what those are just from the names. But in Career mode, you are given a scenario in which you must complete a certain goal, usually something like reach a specific park rating, or make this much money, or entertain this one specific guest, and you're usually given a limited time span to complete these goals. Sandbox mode, though, just gets rid of the money aspect. You have unlimited cash and a blank slate for which to build whatever damn theme park you want to build, whatever kind. There are no restrictions at that point, except maybe the game physics. That's it. That's RollerCoaster Tycoon. I don't know what else to say. You can hire costumed mascots. One of them's a panda. One of them's an elephant. That's the one I usually hire. Anyways, so what are my experiences with RollerCoaster Tycoon 3? So, I didn't really become a PC gamer until well into the 2010s. I didn't play PC games. I just didn't have any to play. But what we did have on PC, though, for a very long time was Zoo Tycoon and RollerCoaster Tycoon. And we played the hell out of both of those games. We had such a good time. By we, I mean me and my sister. I remember in the first RollerCoaster Tycoon having this wildly successful and well-built theme park. Probably the best I've ever done at any game like this. And I think it got deleted or corrupted or something. And I am sad still to this day about that, even though that probably happened 15, 16 years ago. But also, Zoo Tycoon was great. We played that all the time. And then when RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 came out, it was, I think, probably my first experience with video game marketing. Because, like I said, the marketing was very heavily built around the idea of, you can ride your roller coasters. Of course, little preteen me was like, you can ride the roller coasters. But when we did finally buy RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, I think I remember as a kid being kind of disappointed in it. And I don't really remember why. But that didn't stop me from playing it. For a long time, my mother's house didn't have Wi-Fi because our stepfather at the time refused to be modern in any way, shape, or form. And feared technology, I guess, so we didn't have Wi-Fi, but I did have a disc of RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 that I could take over to their computer that they had, for some reason, despite the fact that there was no Wi-Fi. I don't know. I mean, I still kind of look fondly on this game. I think I like the first game better. I've never played RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, though, which I'm told is just RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, but better. So I should probably look into that at some point. But why am I talking about the soundtrack? I don't know. I've hung on to these songs, sort of. There's not a lot to the soundtrack. Well, I don't know if that's the right wording I'm looking for, but in terms of soundtrack that goes in specific places, there's not really anything there for the most part. But we'll get into that in a little bit. First, let's talk about what brought this video game into the world. So the original RollerCoaster Tycoon, I did not know this before doing this research, was an indie game. Before indie games were like a thing people really knew about, there was this one. It was made by solo developer Chris Sawyer, and it was published by Hasbro. Sawyer is also the solo developer behind most of RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, which would then come out in 2002. The original came out in 1999. I don't remember if I mentioned that. Pretend I did. So we have 1999 for RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, 2002 for RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, and then in 2003, Frontier became involved with the RollerCoaster Tycoon series when they developed an Xbox port of the original game. And then later that same year, they ended up developing 2 expansion packs for RollerCoaster Tycoon 2. So for RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, Chris Sawyer sort of stepped back and kind of stepped into more of a consultant role for the game. While he was developing his travel company sim, Chris Sawyer's Locomotion. I've never played that, but maybe I should. And so with that, full development of RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 was handed to Frontier. And honestly, past that, there's not really a lot of information on how the game came to be in the state that it is, which I guess that's not super surprising. I mean, it's a 2004 PC game, but, But I will say that 2 expansions would also release for RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, including Soaked, which added a water park attraction set, as well as Wild, which added a bunch of animal-based attractions such as animal shows and zoo-like setups that you could put in your theme parks, because we all know that what Six Flags is really missing is a bird room. Both of these expansion packs would actually be repackaged and sold together as RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 Platinum. And honestly, it seems like it reviewed pretty alright. Metacritic for PC is at 81. It's got an 80 on iOS, and then, unsurprisingly, and I'm part of this group, a 72 on Switch. I reviewed this game on Switch. I don't see why you would want it on Switch. If you want to play this game, play it on PC. This is a PC game. I don't know why it's on Switch. Though, even though it reviewed pretty alright, there was a lot of criticism at launch because it was kind of super buggy and unstable, which I assume was just an unfortunate side effect of the fact that they were moving to 3D, something that the series had never really been done in before. But, that being said, it was the 9th best-selling PC game of 2004, and by June 2015, the CEO of Frontier confirmed that the game had sold over 10 million copies in its lifetime. But I might not have information about what went into making the game, but there sure are some stories that came out of after it came out. In 2007, Atari sued both Frontier and Chris Sawyer as they saw the production of what they called an enhanced version, which I assume means platinum? Something like that. Atari saw that as a breach of contract and sued them, and this lawsuit was settled out of court. But then, 10 years later, a full decade, Frontier threw down the Uno reverse card and proceeded to sue Atari for unpaid royalties. See, Atari had gone bankrupt in 2013 at this point, so they've been gone for like 4 years, and Frontier kind of believed that they had sort of fudged the money and fudged the numbers for how many copies on PC RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 had actually sold. See, Atari at this point had paid them around $1.2 million in royalties, but when Frontier did their own investigation through services like Steam Spy, Frontier saw that the game sold a lot better, at least on Steam, than Atari had told them. And according to their estimation, that meant that Atari still owed them around $2.2 million more. And this lawsuit specifically was meant to give Frontier the right to access Atari's records so that they could see how many copies that RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 had actually sold, which they still believed Atari was lying, so they could assess how much money they were still owed by the company. And no settlement or result in this lawsuit has been discussed publicly since then, but obviously something must have gone right because Frontier was allowed to release the game in 2020 as RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 Complete Edition, again on both PC and Switch. It should be noted that this was after the game had been unlisted on both Steam and GOG in 2018 because of lapsing licenses, I guess. Not really a lot of detail on that, but fact is, you can go buy it now if you want. And since RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, though, Frontier has put out a lot of stuff. They're a bigger developer than I ever would have given them credit for. Just in terms of games that I recognize by name, they made a spiritual successor to RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, two of them actually, which I didn't realize there were two games in this series, being Thrillville and Thrillville Off the Rails. Pretty sure as a kid I rented the PS2 version of Thrillville. I don't remember it being very good, and also, for some reason in that kids game about building theme parks, the song Honky Tonk Badonky Donk about a woman who has a big butt is in that game. I've now passed on to you the only things I remember about Thrillville. I think it was Off the Rails specifically. They also, and this is a name I was not expecting to hear ever again, did the 2008 WiiWare title Lost Winds. Do you remember Lost Winds? It's okay. Nobody remembers Lost Winds except for me. I also didn't know there was a sequel to Lost Winds. That's pretty cool. I remember that game being alright. I remember it being kind of neat. Connectimals, with Skittles. I think Skittles was in that game, wasn't he? I don't remember. They did a Zoo Tycoon game in 2013. Not the original, so it wouldn't have been the one that I played as a kid. But, they did a Zoo Tycoon game. I am shocked to find out that they are the developers behind Elite Dangerous, which is a space sim game, sort of, that my roommate got really into for a while. And I don't know why this surprised me, but they have made their own, again, spiritual successor to the RollerCoaster Tycoon franchise in Planet Coaster, and they also did the same with Zoo Tycoon with Planet Zoo, as well as they have made two games that are basically Zoo Tycoon but with dinosaurs, being the Jurassic World Evolution games, the second one of which I believe is supposed to come out sometime later this year, if it's not already out. I couldn't really find a date, but I believe it is supposed to come out at some point in 2021. And honestly, just as a heads up in the future, I'm pretty sure the Planet games have potential to show up on this show at some point. I know that Planet Coaster has a fantastic soundtrack, and I'm pretty sure so does Planet Zoo, so look forward to that. Now let's talk very briefly about the composer behind the music for RollerCoaster Tycoon 3. His name is Alistair Lindsay, and unfortunately I couldn't find a ton of information about where he sort of came from, how he entered the industry and all that. I did find his personal website, which says he has been working in the games industry since 1999. His work has been in a BAFTA winning game, and he has also won awards for his sound design and compositions from organizations like the IGDA. He has a quote on his About page that says, quote, described by Edge magazine as one of the best minds in British games sound. And from what I have heard of his other stuff, that checks out. You can actually follow him on Twitter at Alistair Lindsay. That's ALISTAIR And you can also find his Bandcamp page at allindsay.bandcamp.com. That's ALLINDSAY.bandcamp.com. In terms of his discography, man, he's been around in a lot of places. One of his earliest credits is for Jet Force Gemini, an N64 game produced by Rare. He did music for one of Frontier's first games called A Dog's Life, which I can't help but feel like I've seen this game somewhere. I don't know. Obviously, he did work on RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, made the soundtrack for the game Darwinia. He is heavily critically praised for his sound design and soundtrack on the game Defcon, which is another one of those games that I feel like everybody owns on Steam, and very few people have played because it's terrifying. He did the music for both Thrillville and Thrillville Off the Rails, Lost Winds, Connectimals, the indie game Sir, You Are Being Hunted. He worked on the BAFTA award-winning game Lumino City, Staxel, Prison Architect, and RimWorld. IMDb claims that he worked on Bubsy Paws on Fire, but IMDb is the only source I can find that lists that. It's not on his personal website. It's not in his Twitter bio. So IMDb might just have that one wrong. That, or he just didn't want to put Bubsy on his on his work history. I would not blame him. And in terms of historical development research of this game's soundtrack, there's really nothing to find. Some of this music does play in menus and such. In fact, I know for a fact one of them does. But for the most part, these are just songs that you could put on rides or stalls or whatever in your park. It's basically for theming. If you want to theme something around like sci-fi or Western or something like that, this music is supposed to help sort of make the immersion for these digital peeps. But basically nothing else. Also, it should be noted that in the PC version of the game, you could just put in your own music. So that's cool and fun. But for people on console, or for people like me who were too dumb to figure out how to put custom music in the game, this is the soundtrack you would have heard. So why am I bringing it to the show? Because I want to, and I can't be stopped. So let's get into those 5 critical tracks, and we're going to start with the first track, Summer Air. I think this is probably specifically the song that people might think of if they have any experience with RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, if the subject of the soundtrack comes on. This plays on the main menu. You can also put it on rides and stuff, but, you know, I don't think it really fits in a lot of the rides. I think just being the menu music, it stands out just on those grounds alone. And honestly, it's this really, really soothing piece that does have sort of this slower feeling. I don't know how else to describe it, but it feels like it works really, really well with the kind of game that RollerCoaster Tycoon is. It's a simulator. You're not really doing anything action-packed or exciting. You're just you're building a theme park. You're capitalism-ing. But honestly, I always forget about this song until it comes on somewhere and it's just like this immediate punch in the face of like, I remember this. It's just one of those songs that you might not remember off the top of your head most of the time, but when it comes on, suddenly the nostalgia just sort of floods in. Anyway, let's move on to critical track number 2. It's Galaxy Trooper. Now, would you believe me if I told you that this was a sci-fi themed song for your sci-fi themed rides? Well, it is. For me, when I listen to this song nowadays, it feels like it's the title screen music of a side-scrolling shooter at first, and then eventually, like, sort of evolves into something I could see playing on a modern Mega Man stage. And I don't know if I'm alone in feeling that, but like that's where my head goes. And then later on, like, it turns into straight up a boss fight track, which is really, really, really neat. Like, you should go listen to the full version of this track. It's a lot of fun. For songs that you were only gonna slap on a ride, like, a lot of this soundtrack is almost Ring Fit levels of like, dude, you didn't have to go that hard. It's just RollerCoaster Tycoon. The other two games don't even have a soundtrack, like, at all. But he did. And I really appreciate it. I think it worked out super well. And I think Galaxy Trooper is probably one of my favorite songs in the game. But enough dilly-dallying on that. We're going to get to critical track number 3, Girls Like Spice. Okay, so I'm going to say something that might be a little bit controversial, and nobody's going to like me when I say this. I don't know anything about the Spice Girls. I know the one song that everybody knows. If you want to be my lover, gotta get with my friends. That's the only thing I know about the Spice Girls. I am only assuming that this song is trying to hit the same kind of vibe as a Spice Girls song because it's called Girls Like Spice. That is literally my only reasoning. But I don't know. Even without that, like, this song is really groovy and super catchy. And I saw a lot of people in YouTube comments and such saying that this is the best song to put along to fireworks displays, which honestly, that sounds about right. I think that checks out. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it other than it's a groovy time. All right, let's jump on into critical track number 4. From there, it is JJ's House. Why is this song called JJ's House? I may never know. Mr. Lindsay, if you are listening to this podcast, please DM me at StringPixel and tell me why this song is called JJ's House. If you even remember, there's a chance you don't remember why any of these songs are called what they're called. But leaving that aside, this track kind of stands out to me more in this exact time of my life than it probably would have when I was a kid, because this song sounds like it was ripped straight out of the World Ends With You game. This would fit super well on the soundtrack of Neo: The World Ends With You. Like, insanely well. So what I'm saying is Alistair Lindsay was doing Takeharu Ishimoto before Takeharu Ishimoto was doing Takeharu Ishimoto. And I mean that as nothing but praise. This is a fantastic song, and it does kind of feel like it would work really well in a game where you're just walking around Shibuya. But more accurately in where you can put it in this game, I think I used to put it in areas where like food stalls and such were located. I don't know. That's a very vague memory, and I don't know if it's accurate, but, you know, there it is. Now we've both heard it, and nobody can complain. All right. final track of the Critical 5. This is Rock Like a Dude. I don't understand the name of this one. I guess you're a dude and you're rocking like one too? I don't know. This was my favorite song in the game when I was a kid. I don't really think I can say that's the case anymore. I think it's probably a tie between Summer Air and Galaxy Trooper, though I think Galaxy Trooper might barely take it. But it's still good. It's still a very good song. It's a nice rock track. I think I used to put it in the boarding area of a particularly cool roller coaster, usually that I did not design because I'm very bad at designing roller coasters. I'd rather just put down the pre-made ones because I'm a hack. And honestly, I think the thing about this track that really stands out to me is the trumpets. Those feel really out of place, but they also fit in super well somehow, and they give this song this really nice, unique feel. And so I kind of really like this song. I think it's fun. I think it's good, and it's got some good rockin' energy to it. So, cutting room floor. Peter obviously doesn't have any because Peter isn't here. He went out to buy smokes and then didn't come back. I don't know. Look, man, I haven't recorded one of these solo ever. Let's get into the cutting room floor. First track that I have is Bush Baby. So I don't really remember this song. I don't think I heard this song as a kid because I imagine, and this is just a guess, that this came with the Wild expansion pack. We did not have either of the expansion packs when I was a kid. We just had base RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, which might explain why I was kind of disappointed in it as a kid. But, I mean, I really like this song though. It sort of has the same vibes as some of the few tracks in the original Zoo Tycoon has, I feel like. Though, like, I think Zoo Tycoon has maybe 3 songs in total. Like, it's maybe the main menu theme, and I think that actually might be it. But still, hey, this is a fun piece. And I really, really kind of like that there's this soundscape of people sort of talking and cheering in the background. I think that gives it a lot of flair. I'm a real big fan of this. And for an entirely different tone, let's talk about my second track on the cutting room floor. It is Nemesis Quest. Okay, so I want to say that this song reminds me of Doom, but then I listened to it more and I'm like, no, it's not really Doom. Maybe Devil May Cry? No, it doesn't really feel like Devil May Cry either. I don't know. Maybe Halo? Some parts? I'm just not really super sure. All I do know is that this song is pretty cool. I like it a lot. I do think that if I were playing today, I would probably put this in the boarding area of sort of a hell-themed coaster, because Doom was the first thing that came to mind when I heard this song, and I think it just sort of generally fits that vibe overall. I don't know. So what will I never forget about RollerCoaster Tycoon 3? Like I said, I think I like RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 better, and I'd probably like RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 better even than that, but I don't know. I think this game still did have a pretty influential part of my childhood. especially for those years where it was basically all there was to do in the house that I was living in at the time because there was no internet. And honestly, that's pretty much all. I was very surprised when it came to Switch, especially when I ended up doing the review for it. And I don't know, maybe it's worth a look nowadays, but I feel like Planet Coaster has kind of just completely filled the niche that RollerCoaster Tycoon filled at one point. I think Frontier has already filled their own niche in that. So honestly, if you really want sort of a dated experience, you can go to RollerCoaster Tycoon 3. But if you want a more modern experience for a game like this, honestly, you're probably better off just going and buying Planet Coaster and giving it a whirl. I don't know. And that will do it for this week's episode of Original Soundchat. It's, a theme park week. Yeah. You can find both myself and Peter on Twitter. I am at StringPixel. Peter is at PeteSpeakEasy. You can find the video version of Original Soundchat on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel. But if you're looking more specifically for the audio-only version, you can find that at anondino.squarespace.com. And that is available on a bunch of podcast services. You can find it on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, even Spotify. And not only do we have the podcast feed with all the episodes on Spotify, we also happen to have a playlist of every song we've talked about on this show that happens to also be on Spotify. Unfortunately, RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 is not among those, but there's still I think 2 whole days worth of music on that playlist. So you're bound to hear some good stuff if you throw it on shuffle. You can also follow the show on social media at SoundchatOST on Twitter. You can give us feedback and suggestions there. We are honestly trying to do a lot more fan-suggested games this year, and I think we've done a pretty good job so far. But if you want to add your suggestions to the list, I highly recommend you go to the Twitter and tweet at us, and maybe you'll see that game on the thumbnail art before long. Who knows? And we've stopped mentioning merch basically in the regular episodes because it's taken so long to get it set up. Let me tell y'all, that's all on me. Executive dysfunction is strong. I am going to try and get it up before the end of August. Don't worry, you'll be able to buy a shirt with our cool logo on it again soon. Next week, Peter will be back here with a solo episode of his own where he will be covering Kristen Nigas. But the week after that, when everything's back to normal, I will be covering Beatrice Martin. So I hope you look forward to that. I think that it's a good soundtrack that I will be talking about with her, but also the soundtrack Peter's talking about next week, also very, very, very good. So look forward to that. All right, let's play us out with a cover or fan remix of a song from RollerCoaster Tycoon 3, and I was able to find a pretty nice acoustic orchestral remix of Summer Air. It was done by the YouTube channel Sunchip Radio, that's with 2 P's, SUNCHIPP Radio. You should give it a listen, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Original Soundchat. We'll see you later. Take care.